Hi, Commander Runningcloud here. I'm back again. I like to be sleeping right now. I spent some happy time on the Dutch Sense channel, listening to him DJ and listening to the earthquake updates. Mostly listening to mostly I was hanging out at a party online here in YouTube, and that was really fun. I just saw a flash of light come across the screen. I'm back again because while I was, sitting right here, somebody tried to break in again. The lock was open and the other lock was open too. And I might have left one of them unlatched, perhaps, when I was closing the door during the last broadcast. But I didn't leave the lower one twisted too. So that had me feeling a little nervous, a little scared. And when I looked outside, somebody's been outside across the way for quite some time tonight. And since I tried to break into my room again today, and since I'm always writing controversial things about how difficult it is to live this life in an American concentration camp when I'm really an heiress in real life, but I can't get my inheritance. So I'm here. And I would be sleeping right now, except since they tried to break into my room again tonight, I'm afraid, you know, they're going to kill me or something. That's how I feel. I feel afraid that they're going to kill me. Because I know you can see the damage on my face just from last week, just from when the delivery person came and aimed that phone at me. And it could have been, she lured me outside in a conversation. Now, this is such an abhorrent and abnormal life, living in a concentration camp. And maybe if there were other prisoners here, it would be easier, but I doubt it. But each day I'm spending here and I'm telling people about it, and I'm still here, and I'm still here, and I'm still here, makes me feel so afraid that I'll never get out. Makes me feel so afraid that they're going to just walk in one night and shoot me in the head, and that's the end of Silver Rain Runningcloud, and whatever story that I've been telling would just be like every other story of genocide in America. Be like every other story of my people being killed instead of given title to their land. And I just feel so much distress about that, and so afraid to go to sleep because I'm sitting right there and they tried to break in, and I didn't even hear. I didn't even hear it because I was listening to the music and dancing, and I didn't even hear when they flipped the latch on the door. I just heard the voices out there. That's what I heard. So I'm trying not to be filled with despair and feel that no one cares about me in the world. I'm trying hard not to feel like no one cares and they're just going to leave me here, pick me, and let the enemies pick me apart a little bit at a time until they just kill me. And then it'll just be the end of Silver Rain Runningcloud. And that'll be the end of my story. So part of me feels like, make it painless, make it painless. Because if I have to stay here and live this life, it's it's probably worse than being dead. And knowing that nobody cares, nobody's going to come save me. I'm going to keep getting, symptoms and not knowing whether who my friends are, if I have any. And having to use so many fighting words to make it really clear of what I'm actually living with here. But sometimes I get really afraid, Like I thought that a type 1 civilization had moral values to it. I thought I'd heard that somewhere. But when I looked it up, it's just about energy consumption. It's about energy consumption. So if the Europeans are right and the value of a civilization is determined by how well they use energy alone, then maybe the fiercest warriors, the most ruthless warriors, maybe the people who claim the most land and the most resources on earth are the ones destined to continue. And maybe the people like me that, have loved and cared, maybe we're just the ones that are obsolete here. Maybe fierceness and being able to aggressively go out and consume all the energy, like the Europeans have said. Maybe that is what makes a type 1 civilization. You see, I thought in a type 1 civilization, everyone would have a home. I thought in a type 1 civilization, crime wouldn't be the rule from the courts to the streets. Criminals rule. I wouldn't have thought that. I would have thought that a type 1 civilization came with like a moral quality to it. Moral quality to it. On Patrick Bet David's show, PBD podcast, when he was talking to the young man that has spent his life creating a European nationalist youth organization and has been tracked since he was 17. I put it in one of my posts here on YouTube. Well, he mentioned the word character 2 or 3 times, and that was another instance where I really wanted him to define character to me, because different things, character can mean different things to different people. And the young man did say that. He did mention, what's his name, Rousseau? Some French name. The young man did mention, that cultures are different and that different cultures have different values and that the people he likes to recruit have certain character qualities. And character can be anything. It doesn't mean good or bad. It's just the adjectives that describe it. So I'm just feeling a lot of doubts and concerns and worries because I'm not in a safe place. And this place is more dangerous than Woodbridge, where Juan Luis broke in and just moved in and lived there. Until I felt that I had to leave him because of fear for my life. He had a thing about Christmas. Christmas made him violent. And I didn't want to be around for the 3rd violent Christmas with Juan. I already saw the 1st violent Christmas, the 2nd violent Christmas. I wasn't going to stay for a 3rd violent Christmas. So I'm here really with nothing to say. I'm here because I'm afraid to be alone. And Dutch Sense's party ended, so I couldn't hang out there anymore. Plus, he was playing the Star Trek, and they were all tripping or something. And it's a Star Trek that I really do not like. I hate the one with Jean-Luc Picard and that first mate guy. For one, the first mate couldn't act, and that was a big problem. LeVar Burton was the only bright star in that show, in my opinion, because I don't know, Jean-Luc Picard. Well, for one, he wasn't a European American like Captain Kirk, and I guess that bothered me a lot. He was French, and that bothered me a lot. And then he wasn't very masculine to me. I don't know, he wasn't very masculine. He wasn't like Captain Kirk. He was like, you know, sexy by the way he acted. He acted, like a man. But Jean-Luc Picard, eh, eh. So that Star Trek really bugged me a lot. It really bugged me a lot. And I liked it when LeVar was on. But I don't know. Even the storylines weren't as good as real Star Trek, the original Star Trek, with Captain Kirk and Dr. Spock and Bones. But I did have fun with Dutch. There was a guy on there that liked Monty Python, and I love Monty Python too. Monty Python was pretty funny. He was popular there in Canada where I went to school. And I actually listened to one of my other broadcasts, and I was describing my friends from Canada, my best friends in the Canadian high school. I accidentally described them as being in America, and they weren't in America. They were in Canada. And then I called Europeans Americans instead of calling them Europeans, because so many of us refer to the Europeans as Americans. But I try to change that so that there's room for me in the conversation. Because if Europeans are Americans and Europeans, and I'm just an American, and the Europeans do not respect the Americans, then it creates a conflict trying to describe myself. If my race is American and my nationality is American, but I can't say I'm an American because that's kind of redundant. I'd rather just say I'm an American because I'm described by my race as my primary physical feature in a racist society. And my race is American. And if I'm an American, then a European. And European cannot be an American too. And Europeans' race is European. So they have to be Europeans. I have to be American because it's all about race, not nationality. But I thought that the young man on Patrick David's show today made it very clear that his definition of America and being an American was the European nationalist conquering of the American people. And that he saw himself like that. And when he described his feelings towards other people, he clearly said that in the past, most of the immigrants came from Europe. And he said, and not every part of Europe. He was even specific about the fact that there were Western Europeans that were migrating here. And he felt that was really important because it created a unified community. And isn't he right about that? And he's really right about that. It did create a unified community because they all wanted to own what we have here. And they were willing to kill us for it without anyone saying, hey, that's wrong. There was no moral conflict. And I guess that's a lot easier than being confused. I mean, if you think you're an American and you think the Europeans are Americans too, then if you're a real American, you won't see your enemy standing right there, right in front of you. And it's so confusing because I'm not a racist. And I like Europeans as individuals when they're not hurting me. I don't want anything to happen to Europeans. I like Dutch Sensi. I like him so much. I like hanging out in his room. In his YouTube channel. I like hearing him teach about earthquakes and all of that. I love his vibe. I think he's so cool. But then I realized that if he knew me, you know, he would probably be a racist. And if he knew that I lecture on racism, he might kick me out of his room. He might not want me there. He might block me and not let me be a part of his community. And at the end of everything, that becomes the fear of all of us. The fear in all Americans is that we like the Europeans, but they don't like us. And we don't mind sharing with them, but they won't share with us. They'll put me in a concentration camp and steal my inheritance using probate and fake deeds that they put into the record books. And I'd rather be friends, I'd rather be friends. But when you've got enemies and they're creating a genocide on you and they're stealing your inheritance, don't you kind of have to stick up for yourself at least a little bit? I think you do. I think you have to stick up for yourself. So this week I also heard people that moved to Africa, Ghana in particular, but other places in Africa too. And the Africans online, as well as the Americans that migrated to Africa, are letting us all know that they do not feel welcomed in Africa. They don't feel like African Americans at all. They feel like Black Americans, and they feel like they're facing discrimination from the Africans. One of the African podcasts that I watched had a report by a Black American woman who moved to Ghana when Ghana had the Welcome Home immigration drive, inviting Americans to come back to Africa, come home. And she was just talking about how the Chinese immigrants there live in segregation and they're treated with more respect. And the Europeans living there are treated with more respect. And she was pretty much saying that all the other immigrants living in Ghana, at least, are treated with more respect than the Black people are. And I found that to be a little bit upsetting, but I also was not surprised in a way. But I thought it would be due to the economic disparity. A lot of Black Americans are not going to have as much money as the Chinese immigrants might have, perhaps, or the other races of people might have, perhaps. They might have more economic power, than the Black Americans do, because for so many generations, the Black Americans have been cut out of the American economic system. So they haven't been able to acquire much. But I saw the house that the woman had there in Africa, and it looked pretty big. It looked like a nice big house. But she talked about how the people in Ghana call her a foreigner, and how she was looking for more warmth. She was looking to feel like she could belong there because she didn't feel like she belonged in America. And I really get it. I mean, when I saw that they were going to steal my inheritance, and I saw that I was being targeted there in Arizona by the European nationalist racists and the Jews of Scottsdale and Cave Creek and the Germans there in Wickenburg, I really felt like, where can I go? Where can I go in the world? Where can I emigrate to since all the immigrants have made America unlivable for the real Americans. What nation would welcome me? What nation would have a handout for me? Like we Americans have put our hands out. And I realized once again that when you're poor, nobody wants you around. Look, my veins are acting up. This blood infection. Nobody wants you when you're poor, okay? A lot of Black Americans went to Africa without enough money. They just didn't have enough money. Not for, all the beggars that they find, but they didn't have enough money to live at a level of life where you're protected from all the BS, where it doesn't matter to you what it costs to get your visa. You don't care because you have so much money that you don't have to be scared. Because there were parts in East Africa, I think I read, I saw some YouTubes about Black people in East Africa. And the Black Americans were talking about their negative experiences there. But they were also talking about how a lot of the Blacks just didn't have the money. They thought that they'd be able to get jobs in Africa, and they thought they'd be able to make a living in Africa, and they didn't understand the politics that the African people themselves are just now building their way out of colonialism and post-colonialism. And they just keep presenting, how difficult it's going to be to hold on to your land and your resources in the world that's made the way this world is, in this type of society. So I don't know. I like to think that all those earthquakes are a sign of a war in the deep underground dungeons where the children are being held and where all of the European nationalists are getting their economic power from smuggling drugs and human flesh using these underground tunnels, built by the Boring Company and the Nazis and the Jews and other Europeans. I like to think that the circle of fire earthquakes that we're seeing, they're moving into the fives pretty quick. And with the solar flare activity, it could get a little dicey, out there. Dutch Cincy is saying it's going to be an interesting week in terms of seismic activity. And I can already see that. I mean, I remember in 2016 when I was moving to Phoenix from San Diego, and I was listening to Zeta Talk, Nancy Lederer, and all of their predictions for the earthquakes and the seismic events that Nibiru would be bringing. And I was just, kind of thinking about how we still don't see Nibiru in the sky. And it could be that there's, a holographic projection, in the sky. And that's why the sun and moon are the same size and weird things like that. But it also could be that there is no such thing as Nibiru, that Nibiru was a cover story for the upcoming attack on the deep underground dungeons. But let's say that the deep underground dungeons are not the reason why we're seeing these explosions. But I really don't want to say that. You know why? because some places they've had multiple explosions, like White City, New Mexico, has had one earthquake after another, and all of the seismic earthquakes seem to be happening in White City, which makes me think that there's a battle in the war going on there, and that the earthquakes are from the bombs, and that the bombs are being delivered by the good ETs, and that there is a war underground going on. And this war underground is not going to destroy the earth. And that's very possible, isn't it? Isn't that possible? Because the fact is, we really don't know what's going on. We really don't know what's going on. I just know what I'm hoping for. And what I'm hoping for is the chance to leave this planet and have a good life after this. And have a good, long life. And get healed for what they did to my face the day before yesterday. Do you see how much they hurt my skin? And now my veins are popping, and I don't know if the medicine I'm taking is helping or hurting things. And my tooth, it hurts. I won't lie, it hurts. I hear noise out here. I don't know if they're going to be trying to break into my house. My house. That's so funny. Like, this is a house. Like, this is my house. But it is where I live. So part of me feels like if the earth continues, I'm going to die here. I'm going to die here. No one is going to get me out of this American concentration camp. Because look, they're chipping away at me. Look at this. They shot me with this earlier today when I was looking through the window. I mean, yesterday morning, I was looking through the window. They shot me there. And that's going to end up like this and like these. And then that delivery person that used her phone and drew me out in a long conversation. And then I come inside and I got this going on. So I know that if this earth continues on, that it's unlikely that European nationalist racism is going to end tomorrow. I don't see any Europeans talking about what Americans are going through and suffering. And I don't see why they would start to do that now. Why would they start to do that now when I'm almost dead? And I don't see anybody else. Well, I do. I do see other people around making comments about what we've been going through as real Americans and how real Americans deserve better. But I also keep seeing that picture that I saw online from the Smithsonian Institute collection. I bet they've destroyed a lot of stuff there at the Smithsonian because there's so much proof gathered there. But there was this picture from the Smithsonian where the Indians, the American Indians, the indigenous people that are not black, they're red Indians, they were doing their ghost dance, and it was the last ghost dance. And they were in tribal clothes, with just the skirt and the headdress. And all around them were Europeans with guns. Europeans sitting on boxes, It looked like the Oregon Trail. Cowboys. And I just knew that they were mocking and ridiculing the Indians and saying, go ahead and do your ghost dance, but we got your gold. Go ahead and do your ghost dance because you're headed for prison in New Mexico with no water and no land to grow anything. Go ahead, do your ghost dance because you're this close to being ghosts, my friends. You're this close to being ghosts. And you could just see it, You could just see it. And then you think about the pictures of lynchings where a man, you can see his pants have been open and there's just a mess there. And it's black and white, but you could see that he was burned. And you could see his young, beautiful face just hanging, Billie Holiday called it strange fruit. Strange fruit hanging from the trees. And around this, you see a lot of smiling Europeans, like the guest on Patrick Bet David, right? Like the guest he had on his show with the French surname, Thomas, with the French surname. And Thomas is so cute. He's such a cute young man. And that makes it all the worse because he is attractive, but he would be one of those people in the postcard smiling and laughing with a gun over my lynched man, or maybe lynching me. So I'd be hanging as strange fruit from that tree. Well, thinking about these things this late at night, it's 5:22 in the morning here. I'm sorry, 5:24 in the morning here in Houston, Texas. And I was going to take a rest when Dutch's show ended at 4 a.m. I was going to take a rest, but then I saw that they opened my door, the top and the bottom. And I felt a little bit of fear. And I tried to lay down, and I tried to turn my back from the door, but I could just, feel nothing but fear. I guess I don't go down quietly. And my mother said, one day your mouth is going to get you in trouble. No, she didn't say one day. She said, your mouth is going to get you in trouble. And I got in trouble a lot for mouthing off to my mom, saying, that's not fair. Because it wasn't fair. And then at Yale, when they plagiarized me, I mouthed off again. And then at Northwestern, when Gail Partel told me that I was just an affirmative acting student and I wasn't as smart as her and her people, and she said that all of us black people were like that, all of us real Americans were not good enough to be at Northwestern, I mouthed off to her, and I mouthed off to the administration, and I ended up graduating late, behind my class by 2 quarters. Marching with people that weren't in my class all the way in June. I finished in December, but I had to wait till June till I could march for my degree. Because they got revenge on me. They got revenge on me for daring to defend myself. So I think about the price of living. And I think about how much I wish that I could have paid that price. Because silence and silent suffering and telling public lies is the price for living if you have to live integrated. And since I'm not on the Indian rolls, I can't live on the Indian reservation. And they've made it so that if you do live on the Indian reservation, you can't create an autonomous economy. They won't let you create your own economy there. So you're not gonna have an American dream if you're living on a reservation. But when my grandfather Bo's Deck tried to sign up on the Cherokee rolls, they wouldn't let him. They contested his application for the Cherokee tribe. They contested him because he was mixed race, and he was mixed with a European named Martin Edwards. And his primary tribe was the Micmacs, my grandfather said. But the Europeans got to decide who was going to be Cherokee and who wasn't. And my grandfather Bose, well, he was mixed with European. His mother, Mary Deck, might have been mixed race too. Because by the late 1800s, when she would have been born, the mid-late 1800s, Europeans had already infiltrated quite a bit. And they were, mixing. and getting close to the owners of the land by moving in next door, And then the children would be rejected. And this happened to my mother's people from Texas. Their father was a German immigrant, and their father told Walter Henry Muller and his sister Fanny Muller that they had to leave his home and live with the Americans, with the Indians, Maybe might be mixed with Mexican. Some of her kids came out looking kind of Mexican, if you ask me. And my grandmother, she always liked to dye her hair black and put it in a pompadour and look like a Spanish senorita. She really liked that, She really liked to look more Mexican than Indian. And one of her brothers looks very Mexican. He really looks Mexican. One of her sisters looks really Mexican too. And my cousin Fanny, she looked really Mexican. I mean, the Reeses all had really nice hair, They had nice hair. It was mixed race hair, but it was, thick and long and fluffy. It was really beautiful hair. And I think, it came from the Mexican genes that their father had in him from Oklahoma. Bill Reese had curly black hair. He was a dark-skinned Mexican Indian, I guess. And he had curly dark hair. And dark skin. But he was an American Indian that looked that way. So my family has roots in Mexican culture as well. I mean, our people from Texas were probably, mixed with Indians. I'm sorry, mixed with Mexicans. And their father sent my great-grandfather away. Gave him enough money to get a stake and sent him to live with the Gaines family, who were black. And he married Maydee, who was a black, maybe mixed with Mexican, maybe, I don't know. I just know Maydee was dark-skinned. And her husband was white, German, Jew, perhaps, is what one of my relatives say, that Walter Henry Gaines's father, Muller, was a Jew. But my mother objects strongly to that. So I don't know what the truth is about it. I didn't go there and do the research to find out if Walter Henry Muller's father was a Jew from Germany or German from Germany, or a Hebrew from Germany, because one of my great uncles said that a lot of the Germans were already mixed with African by the early 1800s, when Walter Henry Muller Gaines's father would have been coming to America. So he was rejected by his father in that generation. And at the very same time, my great-great-grandfather on my father's side, Martin Edwards, was rejecting his son, Bose Hamilton Deck. And both of these men, great-grandfathers of mine, both of these great-grandfathers of mine, one from my mother's side, one from my father's mother's side, ended up mating with Europeans that kicked them out of the house because they didn't want to be Americans. They wanted to stay European nationalists. And both of these men ended up going to Oklahoma. And then they discovered that Oklahoma was rich with oil and did what they could to destroy our wealth. You know, Boas Hamilton Deck was one of the co-founders of Lima, Oklahoma. And I've tried to get title to the lands in Lima, but the Europeans won't let me. In fact, they set me up for a phony court date to try to lure me into the state. But when I called and checked the calendar, I found that my case wasn't going to be heard because I was having a hard time getting there, because God loves me and God protects me by making things happen. That I might say, oh no, I can't get there to protect my land from the Oklahoma Department of Transportation trying to take another big bite out of the middle of my acreages. But then I found out that I wasn't even on the calendar. I pulled up the calendar online to get the right date and time, and I wasn't even on the calendar. And I said, oh my God, they're trying to ambush me, because I'd already been there twice. I already knew they didn't want me to get hold of my land. I already saw the Europeans stalking me in the Wewoka County land office where the titles are. I already saw the forged document from Joanne Deck that they had inserted into the book between the first and second time I went there. So I already knew that it could be dangerous for me in Oklahoma. So when I called the court clerk and I said, yes, I'm calling to verify my court time, she told me that I was due in court if I wanted to come. And when I said to her, well, that's funny because I'm not on the calendar. And then she hung up. She hung up the phone because she was caught trying to lure me into Oklahoma so they could lynch me or have me arrested by the police for having marijuana, because it wasn't legal there. And everybody who has my dossier knows that at that time I smoked marijuana. And they did have a dossier on me. Don't you ever doubt it. I mean, they not only had a dossier on me, but Arrowhead Honda put trackers in all my vehicles. I cut one of them out and found they put another one in and put another one in the other car. Yeah, Pursuit, Pursuit, Pursuit beam trackers they installed in my car. And those triggered the beacons so that everywhere I went to when I'm driving to Chicago and back, or Connecticut and back from, to Phoenix, I'm getting stalked by the police. I'm getting police showing up and making themselves very obvious. Like I'm maybe at an intersection and then they'll make a U-turn and turn on their lights in front of me. Like, oh, it's the police, we're here. They've made my life hell. They made my life hell only to rob me of every inheritance and every measure of success that I achieved. So when I think about my future here, if nothing changes and we remain in this society, then I'm pretty sure that the Europeans, are going to be holding as many conferences as they want at Mount Shasta and in Colorado and wherever they want to in America. I'm sure that the Europeans at Wadsworth Fall and the other portals in New York State, they're going to keep control of all that, They're going to keep control of all that. And I'll never get a chance to own anything, even my own property. And they'll continue to increase the bioweapon attacks on me. So I go from this to this and this to this and this and this to this and this and this and this. Until there's just nothing left of me. And I don't know. It hurts so much to wake up and find you look 10 years older than you did last week. It kind of hurts a lot. Aging naturally, if you must. But when your enemies age you rapidly, Like you're not aging. I'm sorry, aging naturally. Yes, okay, if you must. But when enemies are creating weapons, bioweapons, and they're testing them on you, and these bioweapons age you faster than you were aging, that's depression, people. That's really depressing. So I look at myself in the mirror and I feel sad. I'm looking at my face in this camera here and I'm feeling sad. So look, they've made misery my only company. So if there's going to be, a continuation of life here after all the earthquakes and the sunspots and after all the disturbances, if we're going to continue on like this, they're going to end up killing me right here at the Ohio Hotel, Katy in Houston, Texas. They're going to end up just killing me right here. Because I'll tell you, when I see those little kids walking around barefoot with no shirts on in the middle of the night, I'm supposed to just shut up forever? Well, when I first lived here, I did shut up, because I didn't want to be dead. I really didn't. But I don't know. If people don't speak out, who's going to save these children? Who's going to save these children? I mean, that was an adorable little boy, and he doesn't deserve the life that they're giving him. But I don't want to die to save him, right? And isn't that just what you're saying about me? Aren't you saying, hey, I don't want to die to save her? Hey, I don't want to suffer to save her. Hey, I don't want to lose anything to save Silver Rain. That just ain't me. So here I lay dying, living in fear, living in terrorism, having delivery people attack me, having people in the hall waiting for me to come out so they can shoot me and make my veins stick out and hurt. So they can send microwave weapons in here that make me hot even when the air conditioning is on. So they can send gases in through the system. So they can send tiny microfibers in. So they can put all this black soot in the air conditioner that would blow out if I didn't have filters. Then I get too hot and I gotta lift the filter up so I can get cool again, because they're sending the microwave weapons in here. You see what my life is like? You see what my life is like? And if I can't see an ending to it, and they're more aggressive trying to break in because they don't like, what I'm saying about them, if they know. And I think with all the hacking they do, they know. I mean, why else would Marcus Smith hide his face if he didn't know that I was putting his face out there as the man that attacked me with a bioweapon twice? Tonight when there was all that trouble down the way, Marcus came out and then it kind of ended. So he is like kind of in charge of the other criminals or soldiers that live here. But when I saw so many people coming out of the rooms, I didn't know that so many people were honestly living in those rooms. And a lot of those rooms are not decorated. They're just there. And if you don't clean the room yourself, well, I think housekeeping does the best they can. But this particular room was absolutely filthy. I had to use a lot of bleach in here. And it actually took years to get some of the stuff clean. Years of, gentle cleaning and rough cleaning with a scrub brush that's electric too. And covering the rugs, covering the floors with carpeting. That helped a lot. Because to do a hotel rehab on a hotel this big would really cost a lot. When I first moved in here, the rent was half of what it is now. Well, yeah, it was almost half. So it almost doubled to live here. And once I started paying the hotel directly, it went up, it went up because I was no longer paying under the table. I haven't seen Sergeant Jubert around here in a while. And when I ask about her, they say she's at another hotel working there. So I don't know if they, I don't know what happened. I just know that I didn't get any kind of a reward for uncovering crime here to the hotel management. I didn't get a reward for, letting them know that there was a double set of books going on here. So the reason that I'm online is because I'm afraid to be alone. And living in an American concentration camp when you're really a multimillionaire heiress, it hurts a lot. But like I said before, I never would have known. If I had stayed in the affluent world where criminals are like Juan Hernandez and they're hackers, but if I'd had enough money, to buy a better security system and a better home, with better protection, I could have protected myself from the Juans to some extent, of course. So I found criminals in every class, and I've had criminals victimize me in every class. There was a show on Netflix that I watched where the court would make this woman the guardian of people that didn't have anything wrong with them. She had a team, including a doctor, and they would target old women and old men that didn't have any obvious family connections. And they would target them, and the doctor would say that that person was not capable of taking care of themselves. And then the guardian would come in and take over and then go about just robbing the person because the court gave the guardian permission to liquidate the assets of the person that was said to not be able to take care of him or herself. And it's so funny, the judge was black, of course, because one thing that I've noticed about the Europeans is when they want to have a bad guy in authority, they'll make it a black man because that's really funny. That makes it funny because we all know that the black men are the victims of that kind of authority, not the wielders of that power, generally speaking. Generally speaking, 90%, 99% of the people that would be doing that would not be black people. They'd be people like Judge Butner in Oklahoma. So if this world continues as it is, as a European nationalist, racist society that's operating American concentration camps for the heirs and heiresses of the land, the real Americans, the indigenous people, then my end is going to be just more tragedy, like what I'm experiencing when I wake up here. If I stay outside too long. That's some kind of behavior conditioning, isn't it? To make you afraid to be outside because you might get shot with a bioweapon. That's some behavior modification program, isn't it? Do you think I'll ever be able to go outside and feel safe again? You think I'll recover from this trauma? Well, I think I will. Because I keep trying to accept this as a reality. And I know that I keep waking up here. And I know that it's already gone on for 3 years now? I left Phoenix in 2021, around October. And then from October to December, I was in Brownsville being victimized by Tina Ainley in the Arizona Superior Court, waiting for that legal action against me to stop. And then I headed here to Houston to try to get my car fixed. And that's when Honda and Geico closed in. And everybody knew I'd go for the cheapest hotel, so they wanted me to end up here because this was the cheapest hotel. It was just $23 a night here when I moved in here on Priceline.com. Now it's like $37, $40. I get a discount for staying, for booking the maximum time. But it's still costing me $1,223 a month to live here in this room. But I do get Wi-Fi and electricity, and those would definitely be expenses in an apartment. So, I'm trying not to complain. I'm trying to respect the owners of the property as being honorable men that found a really good line of business. The Saranac Hotel in Upper New York State is also run by East Indians. One way that the Europeans have managed immigration was to give people career tracks. And a lot of East Indians had enough money to buy a lot of hotels. They bought a lot of hotels in Connecticut on the Berlin Turnpike and moved the sex trade out of there a lot, like the S&M clubs and all that sick shit. They moved that out of there, the East Indians did, as far as I know, in that time. But, I'm not trying to idealize them or anything. They were seedy hotels in many ways. And when I was in the Saranac Hotel, there was an East Indian man and his wife had some kind of mental illness. And the owner, he was obviously not happy being stranded there with all the hostile Europeans and trying to take care of this old, grand, gorgeous hotel called the Saranac Hotel. Beautiful old hotel. But it had the problem that any old building has. And I think that the new owners were full about up to here, because when I went there with Juan, he could see Juan was younger than me, and he thought Juan was my lover. And Juan wasn't my lover. We were just friends. But he charged me more, for my service dog, and threatened me, with a public fight if I didn't just pay him the $75. So I'm not, so it's a mixed bag, it's a mixed bag. But the East Indians were able to get a niche buying up a lot of hotels. And they bought up this Motel 6 and turned it into an OYO. And they were fixing the plumbing again today, and that's going to be expensive. I mean, we were trying to fix the plumbing in our house in Connecticut, and we couldn't get a plumber to come in and do the job right. We just couldn't pay them. And after a while, they wouldn't even try to fix it. They'd just let our property values, go down. I learned a little plumbing myself to solve the problem myself. And when I made mistakes and had to call the plumber in and found out they wrap a little string around there, well, we just put PVC pipes in, the plastic pipes that you screw together with little lock systems, and it was easy as pie to fix the plumbing myself. Because the tradesmen didn't want to work for real Americans, but they couldn't work for the Europeans either. I mean, Carrie, one of the women I knew who had a Girl Scout troop when I had a Girl Scout troop, In fact, when some of the parents saw that I was the leader of my Girl Scout troop, they pulled their daughters out. They said they didn't want a real American leader. They wanted Europeans. So they put their girls in the other troop, which was fine with me. I had 24 girls. That was all I could take. And my girls won more badges than any other troop. When our district had the award ceremony, when the season ended, I won almost all of the prizes. Almost every prize that they offered, I won. I went home with so many awards because my troop broke all the records. So I didn't care if the Europeans didn't want their daughters in my troop. The parents in my troop got a newsletter every week that would have their daughters' names in it and what their daughters did if their daughters did something. Every week I told the parents, this is what we did. This is what your daughter did. I sent them a 2-page, 2 to 4-page newsletter because I was in between seasons of graduate school. So I had all this energy and all this ambition. So I didn't care if some of the Europeans didn't want their daughters in my troop. My troop was the best troop, and my girls were the luckiest. And if those people that let racism change their opinions, go ahead. I mean, by then I was in my 30s, late 30s or 40s. Maybe I'd hit 40 by then. And I was used to them and their cruelty. I mean, my daughter was in the ballet troupe, and if you want to meet some catty bitches, put your daughter in ballet. I mean, pre-professional ballet. I mean, she became a ballet company. We charged for their performances. The troupe wasn't paid. The New England Ballet Company wasn't paid. But once they made the New England Ballet Company from the students in the New England Ballet School and took the best performers like my daughter. I mean, my daughter danced the Snow Queen in the Nutcracker. And that was our biggest performance of the year with a big audience. 4 nights, 4 or 5 nights, 2 weekends. I'm not sure. We ran that show again and again. I think it was over 2 weekends. Maybe it was just 1 weekend. No, it was 1 weekend. But it was like a matinee, an evening show, a matinee, an evening show. I'm pretty sure that's how we ran it. I'm pretty sure we did a Friday night, Saturday matinee, Saturday night, and Sunday matinee, maybe Sunday night. And my daughter made it to the Snow Queen. And then she quit because they would never let her be the star of the Nutcracker, the little girl that plays the star of the Nutcracker. Because the star of the Nutcracker was always blonde with long blonde hair. And they would put it in ringlets. She had to have a very European look. And I remember when the Bain family, they moved to Connecticut from Texas. And their daughter and son were both ballet dancers. And the Bain mother did all of our wardrobing. She made all the costumes for the girls and fit them in the costumes. And the Bains didn't like me. They didn't want me to get ahead because they were Texas Europeans. They were racists. So once they came to Connecticut and joined the company, a lot of the other Europeans, they wouldn't even speak to me if they'd ever spoken to me before. But the Bains were especially rude to me. And I was always volunteering. When the girls were little, I was volunteering as a dresser in the back that would help the girls get dressed and get themselves together and tell them when to, and walk them to the backstage entrance when it was time for their part of the performance and babysit them while they weren't. And I did that until my daughter worked her way. But my daughter was in the company as a little girl. They put her in the company because my daughter had an amazing sense of discipline and she loved ballet. I mean, she absolutely loved ballet. I remember when she was in one of those dance schools that do jazz and tap as well as a little ballet, Gloria Jeans. Excuse me, and they do a lot of dance competitions, those kind of schools. That's where I started her. And when Gloria Jeans joined the other dance schools of Connecticut at a 2-day recital at one of the university auditoriums, My daughter sat on my lap cross-legged because that's how little she was. And she watched hour after hour after hour of these other children dancing, tap and jazz. I mean, this is even after her performance. And she had a costume. She was in 2 numbers or 3 numbers, doing her tap dancing. And it was just really incredible. But she watched everybody else's performance because she loved it just that much. And she was 4. She was 4, 5 years old. So I said, oh my goodness, this one really likes ballet. And I was thrilled. I was happy that she loved dance and loved ballet in particular. And I was really happy about it because I had wanted to be a ballerina when I was a little girl. But I wasn't able to. I got ballet lessons when I lived in Washington, D.C. when I was 8 or 9 or 10. But by then you're kind of old, right? And then the next time I got ballet lessons, I was in Canada. And the ballet teacher was French. And she gave ballet to my junior high school. And one day she pulled my sister out during a recital and said, "You see, she has a curved back." And she made my sister show her body because we were Americans. And my sister had a black booty, had a little fat butt. And the French ballet teacher used my sister as an anthropological specimen of a real American. And I remember that. And I remembered how rude she was and mean she was to me. So by the time I met the French teacher at the Bishop Strawn School, and I came to class with an afro, and she said, "You cannot be in my class," with her French accent, "with that hairstyle. Go comb your hair. You cannot be here with that." And I was at a private boarding school, right? With all these Europeans, and nobody's being particularly nice to me, and I'm 2,000 miles away from any of my relatives, and I'm 15. I wasn't happy. I wasn't happy at all being at Bishop Strawn School in grade 11. And when I found out that in Ontario you had to go to grade 13 in the private school system, and I was already behind for grade 11 in the boarding school system, my school in Saskatchewan, Walter Murray Collegiate Institute, we were just on volume 1 of the French book. And they were in the second part of volume 2. We didn't even know there was a volume 2 to that French book series. And the German book, oh my God, it was thick and small and all German because they had already gone through all the German lessons. So I was studying German and French as well as English in Saskatchewan, as well as chemistry and physics and biology and mathematics. But at the private boarding school, they were dissecting worms. Okay? Now, with my glasses, I could not see well enough to dissect a worm. Dissecting a worm is disgusting. But they were going to bring fetal pigs in for the next semester. And I didn't want to be any part of it. I didn't want any part of that. I really didn't. I didn't want any part of that at Bishop Strawn School. So there I am in Ontario, Toronto, at the Bishop Strawn School, a poor Black American living in Saskatchewan with a graduate student mother and a medical school stepfather who's doing his residency in Toronto at the same time. At the Toronto Children's Hospital there, neurosurgery. And there I am, having a very unpleasant experience in a lot of ways. And I go down with a natural hairstyle, and my French teacher humiliates me in front of the class and tells me that I cannot stay in that class, that I have to go back upstairs. Well, I really wanted to die. but all I had was aspirin. So I took them. And it just gave me tinnitus and made me really dizzy, and I had to spend a couple of days in the infirmary. It was just also overwhelming, and I'd already dealt with so much trauma by then. Just an unbelievable stream of trauma from real estate cheats that deprived me of my first home and broke up my parents, to the bums in Saskatchewan that later moved to America, 2 of them, and find profitable lives here because of European nationalist racism. And they had caught on by then. I mean, Lita Atkinson was always trying to get me arrested or in trouble. That's what she did. There was a picture of me smoking a cigarette because they taught me to smoke. Peer group pressure can be a bitch. But then she had the school photographer come and take a picture of me smoking outside the school across the street with her and the other girls. And then she makes sure that that picture becomes part of the yearbook so that there's a permanent history. And then when I get my class picture taken, the photographer edits my eyes so they look like the eyes on that killer of the Connecticut Europeans that are suing Alex Jones and winning all of his money in his business. Adam Landry with those big buck eyes. Well, you see, when you see me in black and white in the yearbook, you can't tell that I'm different from the other students because of my complexion. And I probably had my hair pressed. My hair was probably straightened. So you couldn't tell me from the other kids unless you gave me big buck eyes. So that's what they did. So if you go through classmates.com and you find a picture of me in my high school yearbook from Walter Murray, you will see me. I'll be the one that stands out because I've got buck eyes. Just like the Europeans that took my baby picture in New York made sure that my baby picture looks like this. So I look like a very unhappy child. And I know for a fact that way back then I was pretty happy, because I remember doing Romper Room. And Dolly, my great aunt who came to New York to take care of me, who raised my daddy too, she came to raise me. She would give me pots and pans out of the kitchen so that I could play along with the Romper Room band and march around my living room, playing with Romper Room. And I used to sit there cross-legged, Indian style, on the floor watching the Romper Room teacher. I couldn't wait to go to school. My brother went to school and I wanted to go to school too, so bad that my mom let me go to school early. I went to school at 4, I'm pretty sure. Yeah, I think she might have lied about my age. I went to kindergarten, younger than the other kids. And the Romper Room teacher used to get a little round mirror with no mirror in it. And she would, have this little part of the show where she would say, "Magic mirror, show me who's here today." But she had a rhyme about it. And she'd say, "I see Bobby, and I see Susie, and I see Betsy." And she would just name, these names. And you could write a letter into her to get her to name your name. And I used to ask Dolly, "Please write a letter. I want Romper Room to say my name." But my name was Letha. Excuse me. And she wasn't likely to guess a name Letha or make it up. So, letter or not, I never got to hear my name on Romper Room. And that was the saddest moment I knew. I was happy otherwise. Dolly would cook for my mother when she got home from work. And hours later, in the night, maybe 11 o'clock at night, when my grandmother would get home from her store, Dolly would cook again, and I would eat again. So I would have 2 dinners, And it was great when they fried fish. Because when they fried fish, everybody would say, I can't believe that she can eat that fish and not be bothered and be able to handle all those bones. But that was before they knew I was nearsighted. So I was looking at everything microscopic up real close. But I loved fried fish. So I was a happy child. I had my grandmother living in the house. I had my great aunt that raised my father, so had a special delight in me. I had her living in my house. I had my mommy and my daddy and my big brother living in my house and my baby sister. I was happy as can be. So it's really sad that the photographer only produced a picture of me looking sad for my mommy, and that my baby picture has me looking sad. And it's even sadder that sadness became my reality, kind of a predictive programming moment. But the nice thing is when we got to Chicago, my mother had my high school graduation pictures taken by a professional photographer that was an American, a Black American, just like us. And he took lovely pictures of me. And when my mother put that picture of me up in her office, it was easier to forget about the way the Europeans gave my mother a baby picture of me that made me look like I was sad to have her and be a part of my family. I've got my veins really sticking up, and I'm hearing noises. Outside my door, but I see that the sun is coming up here. The sun is coming up. Well, I'm going to rename this the story of Silver Rain Runningcloud, because this is really not an exopolitical diplomacy conversation unless I go here. So I'm going to go here. I told you all that stuff about me. And the goody teas, you should know the stories about me and all the suffering that I've done. Because I can't help but come back again and again and again to what I really think is going to happen. And what I really think is going to happen is that I'm going to be raptured off this planet. And you can call it raptured, even though I'm not Christian and I don't believe that rapture is exactly what's going to happen to me. But I do believe that I will be leaving this particular reality, but not by dying, not by being murdered or dying in a cataclysmic event. I believe that I will go on, and I will go on as a leader of the Earthians. And the Earthians are going to be that 144,000 Earthians that the Bible prophesies will be saved. Because while it could be an extraterrestrial war underneath the earth, it could also be a cataclysmic event. And while it might not be Nibiru, because perhaps Nibiru is a mothership, like some people have said, I just think we would have seen Nibiru by now. I just think we would have seen the debris falling or the tails. The way that Nancy Lederer described it, it sounded pretty fantastic. But Nancy Lederer could have been somebody who had access to time travel data from the German Nazi Bell, that technology from the extraterrestrial Pleiadians and tall Norwegian and tall whites that helped the Nazis create the atomic bomb. They could have known from time travelers that their war was coming. So I don't know what's happening. I really don't know. Could be an ET war and the Earth remains intact. And then we've got to deal with all of the problems we have here with the Europeans. and genocide. But whenever I think of that scenario, I just see me dying here. I just see me getting killed here because there's nowhere for me to go from here. You understand what I'm saying? It's going to be hard to find a cheaper place to live that's safe. It's going to be hard to find. And with what they're doing to our food supply, I still can't find any ginger at Sam's Club. They're still out of ginger. So, the shortages that might be expected, the death of the dollar. I mean, we're facing a lot of really, really challenging things. And we have not been allowed to prepare for it, right? Now, if you knew that there were going to be cataclysmic events, wouldn't you encourage all Americans to grow their own groceries, as Homestead Heart advises us? Wouldn't you save lives by having the people get prepared? You wouldn't destroy their food, right? But if you thought everybody was going to die anyway, you might just destroy their food because they're not going to need it, right? And if you're profiting from terrorism, like enjoying it, feeding off of it, using it to manipulate people, then you just might want to do that. You just might want to terrorize people till the very end. Because that does seem to be what's happening. I mean, why would they let society crumble if they weren't expecting a cataclysmic event? So when I think about that, and I'm ignoring the Europeans that talk about what they think about UFOs, while they're ignoring me and racism, as far as I can tell, some of them are ignoring me because they are good ETs that have integrated themselves into our society. And I know this, but I don't know this. You see what I'm saying? Everything about me is speculation, 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 because I don't know anything. I don't know what's going to happen. But I do know that my enemies were able to do this to me, shoot me in the face again. And they were able to do this, deepen the injury on the other side. And they were able to create the damage that I feel right here. They were able to do that to me. And maybe the medicine I'm taking, it might be making things worse. It might be making things worse. That was what I feared. Because we can't trust them. So how do I know? I'm taking the fenbendazole to try to get rid of this nano parasite infestation. But what if they contaminated the medicine? What if the reason that this is happening is not because of the transvestite with the telephone? What if it's because of the medicine I'm taking to kill these critters? I just really need to know. I really need to know more. But it's not going to let me know more just because I need to know more, right? I'll know more when it happens, won't I? I'm so tired right now. I'm just going to go to sleep even though I'm afraid. Now that it's day coming, it would be a lot harder for anybody to break in and kill me. So I could conceivably sleep. But I am expecting a delivery. I just hope it doesn't go downstairs. But they've really shown me, that I don't have much personal security here. And that I have to continue to be vigilant. And that if I show my face outside, they're going to damage my body more. So every day I'm staying here, I feel like I'm at high risk, right? And because I am staying here and because I am at high risk, I feel like nobody's going to save me. I feel abandoned. I feel like I'm not going to make it off this planet, and that life on this planet is going to continue to be hell for real Americans. Because the Europeans have no self-awareness and no intentions to accept responsibility for the things they've done. I mean, we've got Simon Parkes and Charlie Ward and Benjamin Fulford, all foreign Europeans. Two of them actually living there in Europe, one living in Japan by way of Canada. And they are all so interested in the politics of my nation as if they've got an investment. And guess what? Europeans are the investors. And America is ruled by the CEOs, which means they're ruled by the European investors and the courts and the lawyers and the police. So there's no way out of here. You know, they're just watching me do the ghost dance. They're just watching me do my ghost dance here and laughing while I'm, getting scarred up, prematurely aged, made ugly so I don't even recognize myself. So that every time I get a food delivery, I'm a nervous wreck because I don't know if they're going to send me animal meat like they did one time, or if I'm going to get food that's decent, which I have repeatedly. But now my teeth are falling. I have this tooth problem that makes, because of the bioweapons. So if I have to stay here, I don't see how it's ever going to get better, right? If I have to go to a dentist in America, he's just going to mess me up more, right? Because look what the dentists that I did go to did to my teeth with hairline fractures, with the Invisalign braces. And even Dr. Eves even poked holes in my teeth. Like American Indians, the back of our teeth have a curve near the roof of our mouth. Two front teeth, they're flat and then curved, like, outward. But Africans and Europeans, the backs of their teeth are straight. And that's something that you don't hear a lot, and it's hard information to find. But better than the, fake-ass DNA tests, you can just check your teeth to see, if you're an American. And if your teeth have a little bow in them. Now, Edmund Eves actually poked a hole in the bow in my teeth and looked at me like with the evilest eyes. And he hairline cracked my teeth. And he put crowns in my teeth that hatched creatures. This just burped again. So who would I go to? Who could I trust out of American dental schools? Who could help me restore my teeth? Because the plan was for all Americans to be going to Western Dental to get implants. That was the investors' plan. And knowing that they're going to sabotage people's teeth, and knowing about when the teeth would be giving out, when the creatures would be hatching and expanding through your mouth, so you'd run to the doctor and you could have oral cancer, you'd believe it. All your teeth have to go, you'd believe it. We're going to have to do all these procedures, you'd believe it. And now we're going to have to give you steel implants in your mouth. And you'd say, wow, it's way better than dentures. But you were set up. You were set up to lose your teeth. You know how many skeleton heads, skulls are in museums with all their freaking teeth in because nobody tampered with their teeth and made them fall out. Eh, eh. You see, life on Earth with these people, with this power system, it's not good for anybody, but it's especially not good for me because I'm in an American concentration camp.